Do you have a question off of your head?
Yeah, so let me see. It's a two-part question. First question is, what is the best advice that was given to you that you live by?
I can only pick one.
Only one. And the one that you say now is just the one that stands out now in this particular conversation, you know?
Never lose God. The sight of God.
Okay.
No matter what happens in this world, never forsake God. I'd say my mom told me that.
Was it in a certain time in your life?
It was when I was a kid in Korea. It was a season where my parents were teaching me the Bible, essentially, from front to the back cover. And I was still relatively young. I was probably 8 or 9-ish. Yeah, This is like little before coming to America, because I came here when I was 10 years old. And so once they instilled what faith and perception and distinguishing what is good and evil, once they allowed me to understand that, they basically instilled to me that good and evil is a real thing. It's not some sort of mere spectrum of the way how people perceive it as, It's not a relative thing, It's a real thing. And that there is real spiritual reality, and there's eternal realm. When our physical body dies, we will indeed go to the next realm, which is eternal. There's no time. So I would say that would be it.
Okay. So the second part of the question flips this around a little bit. What is the worst piece of advice that you live by?
That I've been given.
That, yeah, in some form or way.
I mean, there's many, I'm trying to narrow down to only one, so that's difficult.
Yeah, the problem with bad advice is
there's
that...
too many of them.
Yeah, you can get a lot of bad advice from a lot of places.
You gave me such a difficult answer to just answer with only one answer.
Yeah, but I mean, there could be one that just kind of revolves.
Yeah.
Something that sticks out, not necessarily because it's the worst, but because it's constant, or it just pops up consistently.
Well, there's one I can kind of think about, I guess. The advice when people say never trust anyone, right? And it's almost like I want to believe that because, I kind of somewhat went through that experience in my own way, like last year especially. But it's it's not true. It really isn't true, And when someone says don't trust anyone, that's such a bold claim. It really is. It's literally about, that statement is basically saying relationships don't matter in a way. You know what I mean? So,
or relationships are to be avoided.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really coming from people who have had many broken relationships, or their trust had been stolen from them, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, right now I can think of that one. So
yeah, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
Okay, you want one more? Okay. Sort of two parts of a question, but I'll just join it together with an and. what is your best advice to yourself, and what prevents you from taking it?
I suppose this is like one of the reasons why I audio record and I sometimes like tell you I talk to myself, my future self, right? It's like, that's a hard one too, man. I feel like that advice can also change with time, you know? I could give myself the most wisest, you know, most self-protecting type of advice, you know? Because, right, if you don't protect yourself from any philosophical or perspective of other people that, you know, that is a little weird or it's not truth-based, then you have to protect yourself in that sense, right? Because, you know, there are a lot of people out there, like, quote figures or people who are, you know, giving advice to different people, you know? And you don't even need a degree for that kind of stuff, you know? And this is like a dangerous thing about like one of those, like, when you respect someone too much, you can idolize them. So therefore, the way how you receive the advice from that figure, it's as if like you just blindly trust everything that they say. Many people do this with public figures, pastors, many of their celebrity, whatever, you know, these so-called social media influencers and things like that, you know. But again, you know, anyone with a tongue can speak, you know. So if I can tell myself is that keep the Holy Spirit's discernment the closest to your heart. Try to listen for that voice. Whenever you're in the ocean and you're drowning in people's voices and the noises of the world, just remember back to that state where it was just you and the Holy Spirit, and He have always interpreted every aspect, every relationship, every encounter that you've ever had in life, and He's the one who interpreted these difficult moments for you. So listen for that voice. Yeah, that's what I would tell myself.
And what prevents you, or what is difficult about following that?
The difficult part is that there are a lot of hard truth that sounds really good, you know, to a degree, to a certain depth, right? And it can come from respected Christian figures too, you know, even like prophets or like these so-called Old Testament, you know, kings and stuff like that. It could be from disciples or whoever. But at the end of the day, they're all human beings. Like these are like not God Himself, you know. And God always speaks to us, you know, to human beings as an instrument. We're all instrument of Him, right? But at the same time, in the process of that, we also intermix with our human knowledge and wisdom and things like that. I mean, we sometimes can't help it, you know? And so what I'm saying is like, it's not a pure God's holy divine guidance or wisdom. You know what I mean? So it's like we talked about the different mixed drinks, right? The coconut, like, it's not pure after a certain amount of mixture of, you know, other ingredients. You know what I mean? So if there's advice that I think myself, sometimes I have to, again, as humble as possible, I try to tell myself, even like my dad's advice, I mean, he is a few, I mean, even someone like him, I idolize and like, I really revere, right? Like the way how you do with Prophet Lovi and that type of thing. And you should also understand that too, Joe, you know that, right? So as much as we have these certain figures in life who we truly like adore, admire, and revere, and etc., like we know that we're all human beings, like fleshly beings. So we have to always put God in a preeminent seat. Preeminent means that it's reserved for the one only, you know? So there's really no other seat but the one.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a dangerous road, especially when sometimes like there's preachers or pastors or social media characters who have so much like charisma to where they sound so convicting or certain. We just can't connect that what's the word I'm looking for, like we can't connect our own like intellect with the discernment that God has given us, and we just become like blinded by whatever they say is fact, you know. And then unfortunately what happens is we just become like bottle fed, and then we just end up following everything and anything without any sort of like fact checking or any sort of like okay, so did God really say that, or is this like a paraphrasing, you know? So yeah, definitely
extremely dangerous, right?
That is dangerous when you're I mean, I think here's another thing that kind of goes into that vein. Sometimes when you lean on someone else's revelation without the understanding of what that revelation means, and you just have your own interpretation without being edified and being ready for that revelation, then what we end up doing is we end up sabotaging that revelation and turning it into our own manipulated way of like navigating life and justifying like, oh, well, God said I can have this, so this is the way I can go. And, you know, we can just do whatever we want, basically, you know? Right. So definitely, I think that's a dangerous vein. So yeah, I always do feel, I do feel on guard, like when it comes to like people speaking about like spiritual things, you know, about like demonic things, because some people I do understand are like very like into their theology, very into their Bible and specific doctrine. But then on the other hand, there's other people who are very, very spiritual, and then they might quote like one verse, you know, sometimes no verses at all, which is weird, you know, but then they just lean on intuition and discernment without any like biblical backing and stuff like that, you know.
So I'm gonna just purely expose myself here. I know okay amount of Bible, right? But I don't know the Bible the way how my dad knows Bible. My dad is like, it's a different level, you know? And honestly, like if I'm like, don't take this wrong way too, but I think we both are not at that level of knowing the Bible, like the way how we can like just quote, like distinguish eras and different sections of the Bible, you know, like being able to understand like figures, different subjects and different, you know what I mean, like all these intricate things, you know, and why God sent certain prophets to certain nations at a certain time, and why that was necessary for the next to come, and all the things that prepped for Jesus's coming, and then after Jesus, and then even now modern day. I mean, these are very like necessary. Like if somebody like says that they're Christian, but then that doesn't really mean anything, right? It's like anyone can say that, right? It's just like I said earlier, it's like you can put on a jacket and say like I'm a Christian, you know, like anybody can do it, you know. But it's a whole nother game to actually go deep into that biblical world and try to like really understand God, you know. this is beyond just like human academic level,
honestly,
philosophical way, you know.
At that point, it goes beyond Bible itself. That goes into the spiritual. That's what I believe, because now you're talking about not just what God said and what God is saying through the Bible, but now you're talking about what he's saying to you specifically, and in relation, and tangible feelings and things that you can see, not just things that you saw from the Bible, and not just intuition and insight that you read, and now you understand like the workings of that relationship in the Bible. But now you're talking about an encounter, right?
Right.
Now you're talking about sitting with an angel over here, sitting with Moses over here, you know, speaking with an angel of the Lord in front of you, or them commanding you, or being brought into, you know what I mean? Like, that is not like, you don't just read about this. This is like an experience, an encounter. So that's like another.
So one thing that I'm careful to word this the right way. They say that you can't disregard people's experiences, right? But we understand and we know not all experiences are the real experiences from God. Sometimes Satan does interfere and then give like a weird God-like experience, but it's not, you know? There is cases like that, you know that, right? It's like this, like it's also tied with like when people get demonic possessed or something like that too. That's a real thing too, you know? So we have to like, or people also like believe in and caught up with the wrong doctrine, but then that is like, there's a sense of like a mental and spiritual like a principality, essentially, like something like that hovers over their mind. Mm-hmm. And you really believe it like as if like it's the truth, but again, you've been lied to. And so, but you don't even know that you've been lied to in that time, because it's everything that you know. But,
and for me personally, like, I'm trying to not like deconstruct, but I'm trying to audit back all of the different belief systems I have in my own Christian faith to identify, okay, has something been counterfeited and hijacked, or is there just a large amount of people that just know like the base layer of something, and just there isn't a lot of information or a lot of people who know the next stages, you know? And this is how it is when it comes to, let's say, even like conversational things. Like, you haven't encountered enough people. I mean, you've encountered a handful of people where you can sit down and talk to certain depths, right? Mm-hmm. In the same way, like, I haven't heard enough people, and maybe your dad is one of them, but I haven't heard enough people speak about the Bible in a way that is in a higher perspective than I can see it by myself, you know? And I'm not saying that like I have like an evangelical perspective on, you know, the gospel or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, from something that can be told to me and I comprehend easily, I digest it easily, and I can say like, okay, like I'll look at my Bible, oh yeah, yep, that's fact. But like, I'm saying like in a way that is like, someone tells me something and I have to be like, is that really true? The Bible does say that, but for some reason that's really hard to believe because it contradicts something that I've already believed. And so that is where I'm at right now, where it's like, it's kind of like I've learned how to do a certain type of roundhouse kick all my life. But then someone shows me a different type of pivot or being able to kick twice or 3 times with the same momentum, with double the snap. And I'm like, okay, I've never been shown this before. I see it working for you. And when I do it, yeah, it kind of sort of works. I guess I need more practice in it, but no way. You know what I mean? It's throwing that extra special sauce on something that you thought was already the best thing ever, you know? And so...
Well, let's just say this, and this is like a neutral thing for both of us. There's still infinite amount of things that we both can still learn.
Yeah.
Especially in the realm of spirituality.
I know almost nothing.
Yeah.
That's what I can say. I can claim that I know a couple of things here and there. But when it comes down to it, like, I've only lived this life once. Barely. No, actually, no. I haven't even finished this life. I haven't seen the end of it. I haven't had any dreams or visions.
Well, you're not even
of
halfway.
The end of it. Yeah, but I'm saying, like, God hasn't revealed anything crazy to where it's like the end is near or anything like that, or like I saw a vision of like something transpiring in the future and or at least I can't claim the dreams that I have are in that type of prophetic level, you know. But yeah,
is part of you excited about that? Like, because we can spend eternity even in the eternal realm of who God is, yet we'll never get to know him. Does that aspect excite you?
Well, my mind hasn't gone that far into the future where it's like things are going to be great. Of course it will, you know? I think right now it's more like I'm a little bit uncomfortable because I'm seeing that, like, man, the things that I believed is not that deep. The things that are just like lingo and slang around me, like Christian slang, you know what I mean? Are not that deep. The things that people say are not that deep. The concepts that we're trying to grab are not really that profound. We feel like they are because I don't know why. But I'm just recognizing that, like, until your truth is challenged with a greater and deeper truth, it's not that you've been believing a lie, but it's that you've been hypnotized or like tricked, just like everyone else. So
I want to say something about it, but I think I understand a little bit of what you're saying there. I don't fully understand what you're saying, but I think I understand a little bit of it. Of course, our humility grows. The more we learn about God, our humility naturally grows. And it's one of those things, like kind of like the way how nature has, I don't know, seasons or time. There's, that whole time system, right? Things, I don't know, as you learn who God is and as you get closer to him and your level of intimacy gets closer, humility is like a shadow that follows essentially to that. And but I believe this is also one of those elements, even in the eternal realm, we will continue to experience, because we will always be infinite miles below God, and this should be completely settling and peaceful contentment. It should be. But unless temptation of Luciferian gets to you, right? Where, again, I have to check myself too, right? Because I told you I have this, sometimes I can get into the mental space or this crazy like zeal where I want to know everything, anything and everything about life. Like,
so
every
what was
intricate
the
aspect.
last thing that you had said? I understand the Luciferian mindset, but the last thing that you were saying is something about infinity.
Like we will always be infinitely steps below God. You know what I mean? Infinitely. Like, if God is infinite, I mean, but the thing is that the way how we conceptualize infinity.
Below is in like, in what way?
Like we will never fully understand who God is. We will never fully comprehend who God is. You know, and that's completely like.
Well, that's how
settling.
it's supposed to be.
It is supposed to be that, exactly.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that that's why you have to be careful, because Lucifer already came. He was a real being that really existed and still exists, and he was like, he's basically like an a archetype. I mean, not really like that, but he's a real figure or entity or being that already have represented that. And is, you know, and so for all the rest of the humanity, we can learn from that aspect. You know, it's almost like Lucifer. It sounds a little crazy here, but it's almost like Lucifer was chosen in a sense, like, you know, before the creation, that he would represent this, you know, but he will forever be damned, like, and doomed in the fact that he always is going to want to replace God, you know? And so as human beings, as we progress in this life, as we learn and obtain all kinds of different human knowledge to spiritual wisdoms to whatever else in between, there's always going to be the battle in our hearts, in our heads and in our hearts, that something is not quite settling. I want to know more. I want more, just more of everything, you know. I go through this, you know, and again, so this is why I tell you, like, I have to check myself, and I have to talk to other people who can check me too, to keep me humbled, and so.
But you know what? I honestly think that because God gives wisdom freely, you know, if we ask God for wisdom, he graciously gives it to us freely. I think that...
Not without responsibility.
Of course.
And he doesn't freely give to anybody either, in my opinion.
Well, let me find the Bible verse.
You have to come to a certain level first. It's like I told you, there's a certain prerequisite, right? You have to have a certain level of personal even in a human realm, you have to become some kind of a figure that is meek and humble, and who has understanding of structure, you know, and hierarchies, and, you know, about the existence, and about self-awareness, and, like, you know, just there's certain level, right? And then once you're given spiritual knowledge on top of this worldly knowledge, then it's quite different after that.
Let me go to this verse. So James 1:5. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. So
that's from that particular context of that
right
Bible, right? That book, James. You know, is this the James, the brother of Jesus? Yeah. And I would even argue, even the brother of Jesus was not as close as like John or Peter. You know, it was slightly different, in my opinion. And so, I get what James is talking about here, but again, I have to say, it doesn't make sense that God gives wisdom to whoever just simply asks for them. Of course, he expects certain level of endurance, and he gives you this different test to see if you are ready for that wisdom. And like, just like, we talked about that time. You even said it, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, sure, God obviously is happy to give it to those who very much deserve it, and that who have worked to get to that qualifying stage, right? Because wisdom and knowledge it's a very powerful thing. And if you're just like, anyone just like ask God for that, that's a little bit foolish in my opinion.
I think that something what happens is that God gives it to us, but we're not even, our spirit is not even awake to even receive it. Mm-hmm. So it's like he's already given it to us, but we're not taking it because we're not identifying it.
Well, there's that aspect too. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of like spiritual discernment in ways of wisdom that I'm still trying to grasp, and how to truly wield like faith in a way that is like a tangible thing,
It's kind of funny, but my mom told me about Solomon when I was younger, and about how Solomon had this one special gift from God, which was like spirit of interpretation. And this is something he asked for as well. And with that, he also gained other aspects, like such as, knowledge of the world, the nature, the intricate things about the relationships, and et cetera, mm-hmm. Many other dimensions and aspects about the world, But the key point is, like, actually receiving that spirit of interpretation from Holy Spirit mm-hmm. is different than people who just plainly understand that is important. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So one of my biggest prayers since I was a kid, I've always prayed this. Okay, Lord, I don't have to be the richest person in the world. I don't have to be the most famous person. I don't want all these fancy materials and stuff, but Lord, if there's anything that I know that I can proudly and boastfully proclaim, is that I truly have your interpretation in me, so that no matter what areas of life I go to or I face, I know that you're interpreting the truth for me, mm-hmm. and even though my human aspect also comes to that doubting stage, right? That human aspect of Paul is like, is that really true? Are you sure that's the Holy Spirit? Or like, sometimes I get these things too, right? But I mean, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you know that it's truly from Holy Spirit when it could be my own thought as well? And these are some of the very intricate questions that I ask, to, my dad and, you and other people. And that's why whenever I ask a question to certain Christian figures, how do you truly, truly, truly know when God is speaking to you? Like, how do you really, really know? So when I sometimes say, like, I really wish that God would show up and speak to me auditorily, like the way he did with Moses, because there's no doubt in that case.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But also, all these little so-called voices in our head that many people have said, oh, God spoke to me, God said this. Like, there's so many of that when you go into that church realm, right? You know this, right? Whenever, mm-hmm. like, we hear these leaders talk about or preaching and stuff like, God told me this and that, God told me that. I really think that many of those things are just like that their human, like, ness just taken over,
It could be
More so, not always, of course, but we don't know. So
Yeah.
that's about that. This is
or
the
it's
tricky
like
thing.
something that's like co-signed with, like God co-signed something that is attached to something that we had thought about like in the past, and then it kind of sparks an idea, and so that idea is, I guess, intended for us to say, and so it's kind of like we're trying to say like the original idea came from God, and it's like God told me, you know what I mean, like a multi-link system, and it's like just shortcutting it all, you know what I mean?
So
but it could be in that type of language.
Yeah. So another like real humbling experiences that I go through time to time is like, am I really truly hearing the voice of God? Am I really, really, truly hearing it? Mm-hmm. Is it my own interpretation? Is it my own intricate things of all these so-called my own ability to reason or think? Is that what's interpreting this, belief system or whatever like this for me? Or is it like the absolute truth, the only one, the mm-hmm. Creator himself, he is interpreting this for me?
Yeah.
And this for me, again, kind of sort of falls into that great mystery aspect of to this life, mm-hmm. that I think we're all going to like wrestle with until Christ comes back. And I want to ask him this kind of question, like face to face. If someone asked me like, what would you ask Jesus when you get a chance to meet with him face to face? Actually, that's the question I wanted to ask you, like one of the questions. And also I want to ask this to my dad. It's like, this is one of the things that I would say, Lord, how many times have human beings truly thought that we heard that you spoke, but yet it would ended up being like our own voices or our own imaginations? And I don't know, I'm very intrigued to hear what Jesus would have to say about that. You know what I mean? Have you ever thought of it like that?
I haven't thought about that question because I have come to a different revelation that is like, it doesn't even really, it doesn't really go into that, I don't even know how to explain it, that realm of like voices and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with what you're saying. Is I just can't quite relate to it on that way.
And I think this is another reason why I got intrigued by that world of psychology. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting stuff to think about. But you're blocking me now.
Let me go pee real quick.
Okay.
Okay. I just drank all that liquid.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the things are not quite clear all the way for me. When it does, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, like, yeah, when it comes to the things that you're saying, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. Yeah. I just think that there's other layers that are there that I'm beginning to understand, but I just don't know enough about it to say it like knowledgeably. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so how has God been challenging you to grow into your next level? And what are some things you have encountered to yet embrace?
I think God is allowing myself to go deeper into my internal self, to learn more about my own self. The further I go, it's almost like a tree going deeper in its root system, right? Mm-hmm. And the more I can reconcile things with myself, or the more things I can forgive about myself, I find that in return will
And what do you mean by
widen.
forgiving yourself? Could you give an example, like what you mean by that?
There's an aspect of all of us, in my opinion, that there's certain things that we don't like about our own selves, right? Some of the negative flaws and tendencies that we all are trying to work at, but it's for some reason we just can't seem to quite break it, you know? So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So I'm just like, oh, you idiot, you fell into the same sin again, over and over again? Pathetic. Like, even despite how much God has allowed you to see and witness and experience in this life, yet you're still committing this type of thing. Like, I feel like that's not just coming from the Satan, but it's like it's more coming from my self-talk as well, in my opinion. Like,
So,
you know what I mean?
well,
So in that aspect, like, I feel like here's my limit. I'm like, okay, sure. And because we can't be spiritually high all the time, or like highly in the high state of conscious mind, right, or self-awareness, that we don't really sometimes go deep in that world, you know.
so when you mean like by reconciling, as in like in some form of like accepting?
Yeah, you know, and just being proud of your progress and growth, you know. And don't get me wrong, I do have those moments like where sometimes I do look at myself in the mirror and be like, you've come a long way. Like, you've come an extremely long way from some little mountain boy in Korea all the way to
Like, I'm not
US
sure
and-
what those areas are, but I wonder if that's a way of like having a truce with the sin, or if it's like a need of like some form of like deliverance. Does that make sense?
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
The people who got delivered by Jesus in the Bible, we don't hear the aftermath story of those people. What do you think about people like that? Have some of them returned to sin? You think? It's hard to say, right? We don't know. We can assume, right? But we know that, like, there's a one very great mystery about thing that I talked to some of my close friends and my dad, is that aspect. Can we truly not sin? Like, even in our minds, or even any form of who we are, can we not sin until we go to heaven, you know? And I think this is a great, this is the aspect of what it's like to be human, you know? So within this earthly realm, as long as we're in this physical body, we're gonna continuously wrestle with just the clashing of ethics and morals, and the wrestling with good and evil, and just sin itself, like, and you know what I mean? We're gonna continue to wrestle with this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's possible. I mean, I obviously think that it's probably not possible, but
even all the people who you regard as the highest, right?
I think that a lot of
sin
it,
in their mind, like for example, pride. Pride can slip in without them even realizing it too. Even Prophet
Yeah.
Lovi and everybody else. Even Prophet Lovi, to all the respect, like he's a great man of God, okay? But like he also has his own calling. He's a very different color. He represents different aspects of God, obviously, because God is so infinite. But like, to the biblical like figures who God has allowed for them to be the representator of His book, you know, those figures, they're actually quite special. You know, some of these Old Testament figures, like Abraham to Moses, they're actually very special people, and I'm totally okay with acknowledging that. Like not only do they represent us modern day people as well, right? Some of the disciples, or some of these, like, you know, different prophets, some of these people who have hand selected by God Himself, these people have been chosen to be included in the book called Bible, the God's Word Himself.
yeah,
So
I mean, I think
it's
it
a
was
special
also
privilege.
timely too.
It's a timing too, but
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is, like, it's a special privilege, you know. And I know some people can can get jealous or envious about that kind of thing. But for me, like I mean, sure, it could have been me or you or anybody else, right? We could have just been born in a wrong era per se, like, people say those kind of things, right? But I don't envy that kind of stuff, because I actually asked this about my dad, and then he answered me in some way, I can't remember quite. But because God can still give a very special, again, calling, this is in my dad's book, titled Calling. He has heavenly calling by grace, and then he has another section called recalling. Once I translate these type of things, and then once you read about it, I'm sure you will love it. I have no doubt you'll love this book. I really think so. But yeah, this is it's one of those great mysteries, I suppose, But again, there's only so much. My limit has been like, I think about all the things that we talked about today, right? All these like great topics that we have talked about, and even now we're talking about it. Like, I go through like loops of these, and then I continuously try to wrestle with things that I've already wrestled with. That I'm like, I think maybe a little bit differently now that I'm older versus when I'm younger, type of thing. But still, regardless, like, there's still a handful of things that I've wondered throughout all my childhood and young adulthood to now, that, for example, can we stop sinning? That's one of those questions that for me is the great mystery. And I don't know. And I think about the parable of, this, the wheat and the tare as well. I wonder if there's also deeper hidden meaning about that, where the wheat represents our good spiritual man who's like really trying to represent the sacred and intimate level of God, yet the tare is like this, like our human imperfections and human these flaws that keep getting in the way, but they both grow together. You know what I mean? They continue to be there together because it's all tied in within our own physical body. So that's why that whole battleground, the internal battleground, is one of the battleground that is unseen to the society, unseen to the naked eye, other people. So that world can only be experienced by you alone with God, And so that's why that world, when I talk to you about the internal realm, this and that, this is kind of what I'm referring to. You know what I mean? So I hope you understand that a little bit better now. I guess. But
I mean, really, that internal realm is everything but the flesh, basically, right?
I mean, in a way, you can think of it that way. Yeah.
Because like the flesh is something that, I mean, in most ways we can express it in some way in this world, right? Because that's where we're operating in. But yeah, I think that next level is like the soul realm, the spirit realm.
Yeah.
Is there a question that you had while I look for one?
I got one. Why do you suppose, Joe, you can look at me for a second. Why do you suppose that God has given you a very particular personality, given you that essence of who Joe is, that the persona, your character, like, that is only exclusively unique to you, but you have that, Other people can have similarity aspects up to you for sure, but in terms of the total package of all that, the way how God shaped you in that realm, right? Because you're, very reserved. You obviously have wealth of knowledge. You're a very deep person, right? But like, you have your own personality and you have your own traits and things like that. So why do you think God has made you that way?
Okay, so I believe that I'm made to be a vessel in whichever way that God wants to use me. Because regardless of if I like it or not, like if he wants to use someone, he's going to use someone. Ideally, it would be willingly, right? You know? And so like, I think with willingness of allowing God to just direct my life, he also like collaborates with people's unique personalities and unique just ways about them in terms of just like physicality, you know, if they're athletic or if they are good at speaking or if they're good at moving crowds, or maybe they have like great charisma or they're just like well-spoken. You know, I think that different people connect with different types of communication. You know, some people communicate well in like a camaraderie, brotherhood, you know, what is it, like chest bump type of stuff, you know what I mean? And some people connect well and receive a certain type of communication in a way that they need to hear it by just quiet words, you know? And so I just feel like I'm just one of those vessels that God just pours into, and I speak life in the way that he reveals it to me. And so that's the worldly part of it. On the spiritual front, I believe that people who are a part of God's army, everyone has a position, just like the human body. You know, the body of Christ is like the human body, right? And there's different cells, there's different enzymes, there's limbs. And because we're all a different function of this body, we're all specialized, you know? There's not one that's just like, you're just a common foot soldier type of thing, you know what I mean? Every single cell in the body has its own function. And from the outside, from like doctors or from people revering the heart or revering like the limbs or revering like, you know, the brain and these different things, these different elements, like they're all important, but some just happen to get more praise and limelight, you know, from people. And so I just believe that I'm specialized in my own specific lane. You know, you would be specialized in your own specific lane. And just like many others out there, they're specialized in whatever it is that they're supposed to do, you know? Maybe communication isn't even one of them, you know? Maybe it's something very, very basic. Maybe it's cleaning, you know? And they're specialized in cleaning, and that's their way of ministry. That's their way of expressing the nature of God, you know? Like not taking any sort of fame, but for some reason or another, whenever they leave a room, the room is magically clean, you know what I mean? And it goes unnoticed, you know? There's a lot of things in our own body that goes unnoticed that we don't even know the names of them, you know what I mean? Yeah. Doctors do and whatnot, but there's so many things that are important in our own body that just get completely overlooked. And so
we only think about like the major thing, brain, heart.
Yeah, like most people would,
Yeah.
you know, unless you're like super specialized and you realize, okay, like this, I don't even know. I can't even make up a body part name, cellular name or anything. But yeah, I think that there's just some people that are more, more noticed and, have more fame and acknowledgement than others, but it doesn't mean that the ones that aren't in the dark are not important, because God sees both sides of it. It's just what we happen to see.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
I believe that we're all specialists.
Yeah.
Just like, in the army, like,
Yeah, that's good.
just because you're just in the reserves not fighting doesn't mean that you're not important, because without the reserves, the strategies that the high generals may have could be different, because they realize, oh, we don't have a backup system. The plan needs to change.
Right.
So just being there and knowing that, like, I have backup, or I have backup money, or I have a savings, makes you move differently in life. You know what I mean? It makes you move differently in strategy, in war and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
I hope that answered
Yeah.
the question.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Let's keep going. These are good, like, little short snippets of short form I can make. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I shouldn't even solely think about just that content and stuff. I know. So,
I mean, who knows what it's going to be used for, or later on what it might be used for.
but I mean, the whole point of capturing this is to share with people anyway. You know what I mean? So it's like,
I did have another set of questions that I'm not pulling out right now, because I just haven't gotten the wording right. Okay. So I know that you're
this is also the first document. I didn't even touch the second, the deeper question that I have for you.
Yeah. So same thing for me. Like, I have like 3, and I can't quite get into this. The first one was the ones that I just kind of added on to your document, and then I have a second one with just some of the questions that I had just asked you. And then the third one has a written, a statement, or like a letter form, because I couldn't quite figure out how to put it in question form. And I'm just not quite sure where I don't know where I'm trying to lead to. So maybe another time with that.
I got an intriguing question. I think you might like this one. This is not necessarily intimate, the question, but just I think this will be an interesting question for you. When did you meet your inner self?
Okay, what is the inner self?
The inner self, when I was referring to inner self, is like that very deep realm, internal realm, right? It's an internal realm where your self-awareness, self-consciousness, understanding who you are, why you exist, the purpose of your life, essentially, like all these things, and then you meet that person. We all have a internal self-being. We really do. So I'm asking you that question. So when did you meet your inner self?
Okay, so it was probably when I was saved. I recognized.
When was that, by the way?
I think it was like around. Let me think. I think I was. Well, here's the thing. Like, I believe I was saved at like around 8 or so, but I really didn't understand salvation thoroughly until like 11 to like 13, somewhere around there. So I think it was like, how would I explain it? Like, when I heard a specific sermon, it was like one of those like fire and brimstone type of sermons, right? Very scary type of thing.
Believe or go to hell type of thing.
Pretty much, yeah. It was like one of those sermons. It was like...
There's a time and place for that, though.
Of course it is, yeah. It was a very shaking type of sermon to where it's like, it's not like it was like I just met my inner self. I just thought about it one day, I just met it. I just like thought about it. It's like, oh, I have a conscience, and I have, you know, it wasn't like that. It was just like, you know, it was like, look at this type of thing, you know. It was like a jarring kind of moment. And yeah, it was like a deep conviction of like shame, of like realization, also in a lot of ways like fear and maturity, because I recognized something new about myself. And when I recognized something new, it was that I learned something like immediately about myself, you know? So that's how to wrap up that question. That's pretty much what it was. It was recognizing like this thing is on its path to somewhere, and I didn't know it was going in this direction until I had that experience. And then immediately it's like I got you know, I'm just saying, you know, symbolically, it's like I got teleported to that car that this thing was heading towards, like a brick wall or something like that. It was like that.
Another one. What's one of your character flaw that you're actively trying to work on right now?
Okay. I have quite a few, actually, but let me think of one specifically that I could say. One thing that I'm trying to do more of is I'm trying to listen more, because being on like social media, being on, I don't know if it's exactly being, but like being around people where people look for my voice, where people are looking to see what I have to say about something, whether it's just social media or just like personal life or around friends and things like that. I often find myself in a position where it's like, well, what do you think about this? And the truth is that I don't really know, but I can share my opinion on where my mind is at right now about it. Because that bias that I have with or against something could potentially change the next day, you know? And the reason why I'm trying to listen more is because, one, I don't want to just answer something solely based off of feelings to where my answer changes because of how I feel or because of my mood. And second, like, I don't want to overstep beyond the place where I don't really know and I can't answer with like an authentic, like honest way. So that'll be the main thing. I want to listen more and talk less. I want to be more meek about that, to where like, because like the thing is that sometimes we read something even the Bible, we read something and it's like, oh, like God said this, so it must mean that. And then we just start telling everyone this is what it says. And just so simply put. But we might not be reading the context. We might not be reading the historic like way things are for those type of people. We might not know like the time frame or the vicinity of where everyone was around that. We might not really deeply read like what type of person this is, you know, what type of job this person has. So just like some of those like basic things, but then also just being quiet enough to where even the things that we don't see in the Bible that we read, that I can just like meditate on it.
Which is what? Things that are not in the Bible that you read. Or you
like so for instance, like
book of Apocrypha, like the missing book of the Bible? Or
no. Like, so like just the posture of certain things, like why was, so like for instance, like an example is like just doing more meditating on what it is that I need to think about and have deeper revelation on things before I just speak on it, because I just read it word for word type of thing. So for an example is like when the stone was rolled away from the tomb that Jesus exited, right? Why was there an angel still waiting by that tomb when Jesus wasn't there?
Because it knew that disciples and Mary and they would come check upon Jesus.
Right. So they knew that they would be coming. So the angel was just waiting there, yeah. Right? So in Jesus' resurrection, basically there was an earthquake. There was the angel who rolled the stone over from the tomb and just sat on the stone. And then, what was it, Mary Magdalene that came up and was like wondering what was happening. And my question was, why would the angel just be sitting there? That was the first thing. And then I was like, oh yeah, like you said, because he wanted, or God wanted Mary to see that, like, or well, first it was the angel being able to communicate like, hey, like Jesus isn't here, right? But the question is like, why was Jesus already not there to begin with, but the stone was rolled away anyways? You know? And
to accentuate the fact that he has risen, you know, that the tomb itself is empty.
Right. So the tomb is.
If Mary met Jesus right in that spot, she could have been like, "Who are you?" And like, "Oh my God, are you Jesus?" Like that impact would be a little bit different, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. So just subtle things, like minor things, just understanding like the context of those things, because they aren't always clearly spoken for, you know, like these are just simple aspects, but just understanding like situationally, like what was happening, just like how you would read like any other book. And so when I try to picture it in that type of way, like these are books, right? These are books. So why not read it like a book? And, you know, as you meditate on it, just like any other story, like the context starts to fill in the blanks of perhaps some of the things that the Bible didn't specifically mention, unless you're really truly just meditating about it.
You know what's interesting about Bible is that not only was it written by 40 different authors, has like, I don't know, over what, 30,000 or some many thousands of different cross-references. Not only does it also speak in terms of all era of time, of human, timeline, even though not everybody believes in biblical age of earth, right? But in terms of, at least for us, we understand it that, Bible speaks to people in the Old Testament time, as well as the people in the New Testament, and then the time after Jesus. Bible can speak to in all these three eras. And when you read the Bible in a historical standpoint with that lens, it will speak to you like a just regular history book, And then when you read the Bible with like yearning for the truth, like you have to meet the truth. You have to come and taste, the Creator. In that sense, it's going to speak to you much differently as well.
Yeah.
And depending on the motive of the heart, and depending on if you're only here to, compare and contrast academically, or with the skeptic heart, it's all going to speak to you differently, which is wild. And this is why people throughout generations have said Bible, not only is it the best-selling book of all time, right? Throughout all history of all mankind. A book is a living book, which is like crazy to think about. It's like conscious. The book itself is conscious, like the way how human beings are conscious.
Let me ask this. Let me ask this, like kind of like obscure question.
Yeah.
So the book is also a collection of books.
Right.
If this was like some sort of like Harry Potter type of thing, right? Which book of the Bible do you think would have sold the best? What would be the best-selling book of the Bible?
I would argue Genesis and Revelation, because that points the time of beginning and also the end, right? I would have to say something like that. But so for me so this I love this because I'm gonna go into some of the things that now you have just sparked my whole train of thought that I have on my personal level. Remember how I told you about there are 4 critical existential questions that inevitably we all ask, as we age, I suppose. Origin, morality, destiny, meaning, right? And origin and destiny, like where we're going. Those two are perhaps surrounded by the most mystery, because morality and meaning is more in that realm, like speaking to the individual, right? It's more in that realm, right? But origin, which states the beginning, and the destiny, which is where we're headed, is, it's given knowledge to us by God Himself through His Word, which is the Bible. Now, the complexity becomes, we all interpret it slightly different, especially the book of Revelation, that is, right? The 7-year tribulation, the post-rapture to the blah, 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 all these different things. And hence one of the reasons why there are denominations, because of this reason, But I would have this, for sure, for me, I don't know, it's like a tie, I can't really say one over the other. There is for sure, just imagine the beginning, like the way how, like Genesis talks about, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and He said, let there be light. And just like the first chapter of Genesis, that whole entire like sentence to word by word is one of the most profound book, in my opinion, in my personal take. And then the book of Revelation, that also has its own like very intriguing, symbolic, metaphoric like message to it, but I also hear it as more literal sense, because the reason I say literal because you can just see the direction of time and where the humanity is headed. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. All these world crises, people talking about the end times, to the way how the world is going to end. But to be fair, all the previous generations have said that, even the time of Jesus too.
Yeah.
But we know we know that the modern day is slightly different because of knowledge is at all-time high. Like, right? I like to think so. Like a lot of the modern day, like science and like philosophy, even all these things were not at the level it is today back in time.
I can't agree with you there.
I mean, it's hard to say.
The reason why is, like, in Ecclesiastes, it says that, like there's been this, and it's been like, nothing is new under the sun. That
I fully get that. But I'm just still saying the intricate aspects of human discovery of themselves, the anatomy of human body, to the external world of the galaxies, right? These are some of the things that we didn't know, the history didn't know in the past.
I mean, perhaps on like a carnal level, like, but here's the thing, like, we might understand and know from a technological standpoint of like AI and science in that realm of like robotics, but at the same time, there's other realms that we have no idea how it works, and I feel like there were other ancient eras that knew of some of those like sciences, those
You're
extinct.
getting to like the ancient civilizations of these advanced civilizations type of thing.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to speak about those things, but there could be like holistic ways of living that is just way more healthier than the way that we're eating now. Everything now is like GMO, organic, this and this and that. It has all these labels and stuff. Or like, if you take this medicine, you'll feel better or whatever. Mm-hmm. But in just other civilizations, like, they just knew how to eat healthy with the things that they're given through blessing the food or something like that. Like, it allows God to, touch this food so that any oppressive things that may have been cursed on this food, like, it gets canceled out. And so that would be God's science and answer to eating healthy foods and having a clean living, versus for us, it's like, technology from a science, from a carnal perspective. So it's like, I just feel like that there's certain attributes of ancient history that we have forgotten, and because we've forgotten those things, we're searching for answers through man-made ways, and we're not acknowledging those other things that benefited us in the past. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of like why ancient civilization is ancient and, it's not, current day
modern civilization, right?
Yeah. Like, why did those empires collapse? Mm-hmm. Like, to answer those things, I mean, who knows?
What do you think? What would be the best seller out of all the 66 books in the Bible?
I would say definitely Genesis, and maybe like Matthew or like John or something like that. It had to be something historic. Like, Matthew has good account of Jesus all the way up to his
come to think about this, okay, so the time in which Jesus came in is almost like dead on the middle ground, right? Genesis to Jesus, like book of Adam to Jesus, 4,000 years, and then Jesus to now, a little over 2,000 years. So we're in that. I mean, it's not dead on the center in that sense, like 3,000, whatever, 3,000, like, but still, like, because the ancient I believe like the biblical, like Old Testament era, I really do feel like it was different than the New Testament. Because you think about it like this, when Jesus descended to earth, that is the first time a creation have experienced a God himself descending from a spiritual world into taking on a physical body and descended here on earth. That is actually monumental.
Yeah, I mean, when you read a book and it tells you like an origin, like it answers a question, or it's just like revolutionarily game changing, then that's probably a book that I would pick up. You know what I mean? And I mean, to be honest, like if you think about it this way, if all these books were told through social media, like through Instagram or TikTok or whatever, like what are some of the stories that would impact someone's life, like in a radical way?
God, I hope it's not another David story, slay the giant, like that.
I mean, that's a cool story, but is it like life changing currently now?
It's been used so casually, that they just they think that giant only represents some sort of an idol figure in your life that you just overcome, and God, whoop-de-doo, like I have overcome this and that. No, the story of David, the entirety story of David doesn't really get told often. You know this, right? Like in most churches, we think about that for a second, right? The entire story of David. What about the time when Prophet Nathan comes and confronts David?
You mean afterwards, right?
Yeah, afterwards, after Bathsheba incident, right? Like, and then David said, "I am a sinner." He fell on his knees and said, "I'm a sinner." And the important thing about that first child also died, right? Like these type of things, where if you have sinned, there is a consequence to that. Oftentimes throughout a lot of Old Testament is God literally showing the people that, and then again, when Christ came, things were much different. He rewrote the 10 commandments essentially when Jesus came, right? And into 2 commandments, love your neighbors, and then love God with all your mind, all your soul, first of all, that's the first commandment. And then love each other essentially, So that he's basically paraphrase all the 10 commandments into just simple wrapped up, and they just give that 2, and which that 2 covers all when you really think about it. So these are some of the intricate things a lot of modern Christian folks and church people, like, again, like this is what I said, categorically speaking, when they understand Bible, they categorically mistake as like either some sort of a fairy tale story of these great floods, like, the people make it like an animation or like a kid story out of this, right? Humans tend to make the stories out of this like almost like a child play type of story. But in fact, it's not like that, Yeah. And so these are some of the things that me and my dad, we talked about it. And then he's like, yeah, like he's telling me these things. I'm like, he's right about that, so again, this is important. Another reminder why when we get to that adult stage, like true adult stage, and that if you think that you had a spiritual awakening as a child, it's different, compared to when you arrive at an adult stage. So when you arrive to the adult stage, it's very important and imperative that we all need to go in a deeper journey. I'm not saying go in a special another like spiritual journey, like most people do, right? No. Go in a deeper path, we were in a certain level of water, but now it's time to really go deeper into the ocean, like, I don't know if I explained that correctly.
No, I mean, I think that there's levels to that as well, because a lot of times, it's like when we think of like being on land, that's like level 0. And then putting your feet in the water, that's level 2. And then like taking a boat out, that's like level 3. And then going out into the deep, that's level 4.
Scuba diving.
Right. And then there's going down. and then from there you can get lost into whatever it might be from there. So at that point.
Yes.
There's just so much that we don't know, even of this earth. I think metaphorically speaking, they say that 98% of the world's oceans have not been actually explored.
Around 29.7% of the Earth mass is land, and then the rest, 71 point whatever, is water. And they said that
70 or 60 something, something around there.
Yeah, but they said even in a landmass, I can fact check it or Google it, but the level of percentage that we discover even in the land alone is only a fraction. Especially when you count for core Earth, lots of things that it's because when you think about Great Flood, water flooded the entire world, which means that the pressure of it can change mountain formations as well. It really can. Yeah. And that's why you have things like Grand Canyons, and you have different landscapes of these things. I believe Great Flood did more than just destroy the evil on Earth, right?
Yeah,
it actually formed continents and for me, I think.
No, I agree with you because the way that the mountain formations are, it's like it's been smeared.
And also the water, the way how it has to dissipate, right? They can't just all poof disappear in a thin air either. You know what I mean? Anyway, this is another category.
Yeah, you're talking about geological things and stuff like
Let's
that.
Let's not get too deep into this. But what I'm saying is that as we learn more about God's word and pay attention to history of the Bible and all the intricate messages, right, through different figures and through many different subjects that Bible talks about, we can really use that to quench our hunger for the questions about creation or the question about morality, questions about meaning, destiny, all this stuff, So this is why I really do emphasize when I talk to you about categorically people still have not really fundamentally have understood God of the Bible. This is a really strong point that I want to make to people, and so it's for me, I wish this is talked about more. I really do. I really hope that people's awareness of this it can be awakened, and that they start to change their mentality and their perspective towards the Bible. It's not just some kind of it's not some sort of all these different people wrote in different time, and then here comes some time in a modern whenever the Bible got assembled, right? During the time of Constantine, whatever that, whatever, the historical speaking, it's and then people have a lot of skeptic things about saying because the things that King James have done, and so there's a whole argument to that. I don't know if you're aware of that. People oh, you can't trust King James Bible version, blah blah. And then people Bible scholars. So it's okay when you get to that level of that these people's arguments and skeptics and all the other agnostic skeptics about criticizing about the Bible and this and that. It's unfortunate because again,
what's crazy? This is kind of just a thought that came to mind. In the same way that we criticize food for being is it processed? Is it not processed? Is it GMO? Is it organic? Is it this and that? And we criticize all these nuances of how food is. God refers the Bible just more important than, not just as, but let's just say equally as important as bread, So there's food for the body and food for the spirit. And so the challenges are still the same. The arguments are still the same. There's this the version of the Bible. Is this version true? Is this version true? This one isn't really aligned with this, and there's inaccuracies. But it's crazy that God can still use something that's not organic, and you can pray over it and bless it, and we can still receive everything that we need to receive from, let's just say, a Bible that is not completely accurate, or not completely let's just say that may have been like paraphrased or something like that. We can still receive revelation from that and receive the good food, essentially.
Joe, do you know why? Do you know why I went into the Christian apologetic realm? Because a lot of the evangelicals, like talking about like in the 90s and so on, when the televangelism really blew up in America, right? Like time of Reagan's and like, those type of era, like there was like a legitimate revival that happened in America and stuff like that. But the Christian apologetic realm wasn't really a thing then, It's Christian apologetic is actually a little bit more modernized. It's more it's the realm that exists that can combat against world academia perspective. That's what Christian apologetic is. Because those people are educated people who also go into the realm of these so-called intellects, right? The academic, the professors.
So let me ask you this.
And stuff. But hold on. So like they can, anything that goes against God argument, including the accuracy of the Bible, right? They are able to answer them in a very intelligent and very meek way that, even some of these so-called PhD professors and, the world's greatest leading minds, whatever, they pause and they're lost for words type of thing. And so some of these folks that I really do revere, like the way how you revere Prophet Lovi, there are figures in Christian apologetic realm that I revere, such as John Lennox, Dr. Stephen Myers, Frank Turek, Norman Geisler. You have William Lane Craig, and then there's many, but like those are some of the top guys, So I think it's very important. I mean, again, it's incredible amount of things to study in this world, and it's just you can spend rest of your life just purely on studying and nothing else, and it still won't be enough, right? But for me, at least learning to a certain degree of Christian apologetic is very important, because not only does it exercise beyond just the faith aspect, right? That's beyond just the spiritual aspect. When it comes to human level of conflict, right? Like I have, like lots of our, like we have our spiritual man, and we have our that aspect where we live by faith, not by sight type of belief that we have, right? But we also have this element of human reason and human logic and human like evidence-based type of, sometimes we want these things too, because we not always 100%, we don't operate 100% on faith every single day of our moment of our life. We really don't, So we clash in our flesh body with our flesh doubts and desires of temptations or whatever it might be. And then we're also part of the world as well, Joe, right? This is a factual thing I'm talking about, right? We're not always surrounded by Christian folks, or like we're not only surrounded by Christian friends, like church friends, throughout our life. We're constantly clashing with worldly people as well. This is a really important point. Mm-hmm. So we have to also understand that aspect or that realm to a degree, right? Wouldn't you say? So for me, I learned this later in my 20s or whatever. So like that's when I was kind of going into that realm. And then in 2020, just a lot of things happened with me in my personal life, and also COVID shutting down, and a lot of things happened leading my personal life leading to that. And then that Capitol riot happened, my church split as well, right? And then so that's when I ran into this like deep studies of all these other scientific realm, physics realm, and these different realm. And then that helped me to see the map, of the biblical interpretation of the creation of this world, and the faith aspect, like it's like biblical way is the original way, is the originality. But again, because of the time have flown so much, 6,000 years is a long time, Joe. Long and short time, but it's long, you know. So during that time, humans have developed all kinds of different like interpretation of from the version of the original. When you think about it, like biblically speaking, right? People have monotheistic view, right? Monotheistic and polytheistic view in the very back in the day. You know, there was no such thing as a scientific view. There was no such thing as like a pantheism view even, or even like this theories of like multiverse or you know, like simulation theory, all kinds of different intricate theories like quantum entanglements, like these type of things, right? Those things are relatively new studies and new discoveries. You know, it's a factual
I mean, as
thing.
far as we know,
As far as we know.
Yeah.
But still, and there's also complexity of like going back too far in history, because when you go back in history to a certain level, things get so blurred. Like we don't know, because history is in a way is written by the victors, but also, you know, we know that there's another aspect like burning of the Library of Alexandria. That's historically, you know, it happened, and like Alexander the Great also exists at the time of like, you know, relatively similar time of Jesus as well. And like there are other figures like historical, like from the world standpoint, like these events took place as well, you know? So whenever people try to deny Jesus or whatever, like some give discredit to like biblical incident, like then we can kind of sort of like turn that around and be like, hey, you know, then that means you have to disregard many of these real figures like ancient Rome, for example. You have to disregard that too, you know. So you see what I mean. So these are some of the I would say intelligent or like a wisdom or thing that, you know, the Christian apologetic realm have like allowed me to see, you know. And that's why I knew that it was a necessary tool. So for me, I know sometimes, you know, maybe we have in the past kind of clashed about maybe, you know, I'm too, why some people may have some have approached me and said, why are you always like so fascinated about Christian apologetic and this and that? Like, because I have some Christian traditionalists basically, you know, people only live by the biblical context of everything, you know. And like I'm like, but to be honest, like I really do find this aspect important as well.
Yeah, and I don't think that it's a negative thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a different lane.
It is
to just assist with what God is trying to do, you know, on this earth.
Yeah.
Because people receive revelation differently, and some people really do need to be debated and even defended with their faith, you know. So some people just need the gospel just embedded in them and told, you know, how it is. And some people just need to be argued against, you know, to really test like, oh, like, yeah, I guess I don't really believe it like that. Or to identify or to refine their grounding in faith. So I definitely think that, you know, like I mentioned before, like the human body and just your play in this is different than
right. That's what
many
tell
other
you
people.
downstairs. Like, you know,
Yeah.
God has given all of us like a very particular role or like calling. That's what I was referring to. You know? And like just everyone can. It's not necessarily about who's the greatest, like the way how a disciple argue, right? Because in a way, even amongst Christians, there is a tendency of like, oh, I want to be spiritually higher than this person. There's like that competition ask, you know what I mean? You have experienced it, I've experienced it, and most people understand this, you know? That's why even like they say like the word elite, right? Even worldly way, but also in a context of Christian perspective, you know? So it's like, but what did Jesus say? Simply, you know, unless you become like child of God, like child, you will not enter into the kingdom of heaven. There's actually a deeper mystery to that, in my opinion, that we haven't really discovered yet. This is what I think.
Well, I don't know if it hasn't been discovered yet, but I do agree that sometimes, like when we're in a space where we're so convoluted with information and worldly knowledge, or at least the knowledge that, let's just call it adult knowledge, we forget the simplicity and the asking of like how God just talks really, really basic, you know? For some reason, we have a tendency to just overcomplicate things, or just allow other voices to, enter in our headspace and just kind of just mess things up for us, right? From the beginning of time, that's how it was. So we're falling for the same tricks.
It's a difficult, so when our awareness is raised to this level, it's like another level of like step back and like, man, it's actually, it's easy, but it's not easy. If that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's simple in a way that you can think of the gospel in a simplistic way, but when in fact it's actually not that simple, but it actually is very deep. I mean, it's not. But it complex.
Is that simple, and this is this is how it gets very. This is how it gets. But the great thing is that he still saves the people who receives it simply, just like how the criminal, on the cross just received Christ, or he saves the scholars who tries to legitimize everything and to rationalize everything. He still saves those. So he's on both ends of it. So that is encouraging, you know what I mean? Because I think a lot of times we're trying to figure out like which way is the right way, or which way is the truth. And the great bridging of those things is Jesus Christ.
What is the nature of ontology in a societal standpoint? Epistemology is like how we come to know knowledge.
The study of knowledge, essentially. Yeah.
And the ontology is basically the state of being, and like, so it's like,
so they kind of go hand in hand.
In the realm, in the consciousness and all that, too.
I think that a lot of people are looking for a sense of purpose and like, why are we here? A lot of people at some point, after they're done doing things and trying to figure things out in their life and just going about on a day-to-day basis, at some point they might stop and say like, okay, well, why am I doing this? It's no longer like a doing, but it's like, okay, I mean, maybe you've heard this before, but humans are not called human doing. We're called human beings. So
say that again, one more time.
Humans are not called human doings. We're called human beings.
Human doing.
Like, we're not just doing things.
Oh.
We're not just going around just doing things.
Yeah.
And when we just kind of settle on like, what is it that we're being?
Yeah.
What is it that we're present at? Like, why are we here? And you start going into that rabbit hole of like, what is all this? What, you know what I mean? Like you're just kind of waking up from this, like you're stepping back from everything that's in motion, and you're looking at it from like a third perspective or something like that. And you realize that there's some sort of like present state that's happening beyond this realm of like things that we can touch and feel. Yeah.
Can I say, the reason why I asked this question, in a way, I'm telling you that when you get approached by people who don't believe in theistic God, or let's say people from the worldly perspective, I mean, this is at least the way how we interpret people who don't believe in God. We just classify them as like a worldly people, right? Because they're not quite in the tabernacle essentially, right? But the reason why I bring this up is because in my years of study now with all this stuff, I contemplated and I tried to strategize how can I bring up a level of conversation so that I can still bring up God topic, but in a natural way. Because you don't want to just right off the bat, some of the people, like especially atheists or whatever, people who deny God or who have been hurt by the church people, for example, whatever. You don't want to just straight up bring about, ethics, morality issues, and this and that, like or like even God right away, or the Bible, because for them, in their hearts, it's something that is they have a deep hatred towards, So it's like so in a way, one of there are a few bridging conversational subjects that I would approach, which is the realm of ontology, epistemology. How do we actually come to know our state of being? How do we become conscious? And then if they acknowledge that, you're in. Why? Because they're acknowledging that metaphysical realm now, which that opens a door into the spiritual realm, not just the materialistic realm anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then another subject I bring up, Joe, you know what that is? Time. Time is mutual. Time is mutual to believers and non-believers, and essentially all humanity. You see what I mean?
Ontology is still like very, I don't know, like, I wouldn't say like trivial, but the whole concept of even being able to like talk to someone and me transfer an idea that I have, and then me talking to you, and then you receive it and you getting a picture of that in your own mind, like that in itself is like, it's like Bluetooth or like airdropping, or it's like knowledge transfer of some sort. And other like species and animals don't do that type of stuff.
Right.
When you're talking about like conversations like this, or talking about like sports and stuff like that, like animals don't do that.
Yeah.
But
That's
we
why
do.
I tell the evolutionist, when people bring up like, yeah, humans are no different than mammals, and we're just like, because they sort of, evolutionists, naturally speaking, they sort of disregard the whole morality. Like, how do we come to know morality issue? Like, we're no different than these like monkeys or other animals that just like kill each other, just rape and sex and like, what I mean? Which is like, I mean, in a way, they're not wrong completely, right? Because human beings have done these evil deeds, right, throughout history. But when it comes to that level of like complexity, like the level of how sentient we are, right? Like you can't compare the human beings to that of other classified living beings, like such as animals, plants, fish, birds, etc. We're just categorically different. And this is another, again, I'm gonna go back to that biblical illustration. There are categorical understanding of who God is that is different with many current today's people, even amongst believers, how they view God, until they really, truly, truly read the Bible and find God through that. And we'll have another talk about this, and I hope I can illustrate better, but I know because right now it's getting late. But yeah, nonetheless, Joe, like it's been great chat today, and it was fun, like experiencing like different, me earlier bringing out this different subjects, like sporadically different subjects to that, to like, hanging out with Elena and talking with her, to like even just now, just like going a little bit deeper, but
yeah, I hope we can eventually touch on the deep subjects. I know that we talked deeply about, or we talked a little bit in depth about certain things, but I feel like we haven't quite dug deep yet. I know that you feel like we've gone somewhat thorough on certain things, or not. I wouldn't say thorough. I don't think we've gotten very thorough on certain topics, but it's like we pointed at something deep. You know what I mean?
I mean, we can see it from a distance type of thing.
Yeah.
And then like, hey, you know, you see that over there? Yeah, I see it over there too.
Mm-hmm. What is the difference between certainty and arrogance? And if you are one or the other, could you be able to tell the difference in your own self?
Great question. Certainty and ignorance.
Arrogance.
Gosh.
One might be very certain, very convicted that this is what you know. But then the other side of it is that, and that might be true, right? Mm-hmm. This is what I believe to be true, and this is what it is. You know what I realized actually after giving that illustration? Both could be false. Okay, just because you are certain and convicted, that could also not be true. And also being arrogant, that could be truth. Like being certain doesn't mean that you're right. But also by being arrogant doesn't mean that you're wrong.
I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Like you can be arrogant and still be right about something. You just might just not have a likable personality.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
Sure. You know that there's also a level of wisdom that you can obtain. You can see through that. So for example, I'll give you an example. One of the reasons why I love to hang out with high level people these days is because even if they were to boast in front of me, I appreciate the level they're in already. So I don't hear them as like they themselves boasting or being arrogant or cocky, but rather I know what it takes to get to that high level realm, so that I'm just like, it's okay, you know, I completely am gonna interpret that aspect of them.
Right. So they've been through things to be able to proclaim that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, this is why I say the more closer you are also with a certain friend, and then if they're also in that high level intuition and also the knowledge and wisdom, they should be able to see through some people's boastfulness, or like if they brag about some of the positive qualities that they have to their friends, and it's just like the way how that it is for me, you know. It's like kind of like me going to mom and dad and like, hey, you know, are you proud of me? And then like, because, you know, look at my growth. And then
well, I guess this kind of all come around back full circle, because what you're talking about is now intimacy. Like you understand the difference between one or the other, based off of closeness.
Yes, of course.
You know, when you're close with someone, when you build a relationship of closeness, you can
Joe,
you can smell the difference, right?
That's why earlier downstairs, like even when we're talking about certain topics, like I was giving some of that smirk, right? Because I was already going through that like understanding of, oh my God, it's like a full circle moment, like type of thing. I was like experiencing that, you know, and like I was so happy that we were talking about this realm, and then, you know, you were able to give like this different perspective to me. And then,
like when I was like barbecuing?
Yeah, like that.
Okay.
You know? So there were a couple of moments where you didn't, like, you were a little annoyed, I can see, you know, but it's just that I was enjoying these things, you know.
Oh no, I wasn't
and I was like
I wasn't annoyed. I was just thinking like I don't know, sometimes you can it's like those moments when you're just like riding a bike, the e-bike, and like you just can't help but like smile, and you just got this big old cheese, and all the people are like looking over like, who is this overgrown Asian guy like riding this little bike and just like smiling like a child, you know? Because in that realm, like you have a certainty of joy as well, right? Like you know that this experience connects with something on such a childish level.
So Joe, when you ask me some of like deep personal level questions, I so appreciate it because I have the level of degree of understanding like why you're asking, and also like there's a part of me that I like hope my close family or friends would ask me, you know. And I don't know, it's just like because I'm able to like reveal myself more to you now, you know, because with that question, you know, if that makes sense, you know. And so like also when Elena asked me that some of the deep questions, I was like, that's a good question. Like, who would your parents think you are, or like something along that line, you know. She asked me that question. And I was like, that's an excellent question. That really is an excellent question, you know.
I have a question for you, and actually now that I think about it, I think that this might be homework. What questions do you wish you can answer that people have not yet asked you?
I have a list of that. Like I have a separate group
of
that.
Yeah, you already have questions. It's like planting little questions.
And gosh, yeah, that's for next time. Yeah, when we get together. But yeah, that's good. That's really good. But you see, Joe, like, you see why I keep saying to you, like, why I respect you or I revere you to a level, because with this right amount of dancing ability, I should say, right, we're able to have a really meaningful and wonderful conversation, you know. And I can't say I can do this with everybody, any like my other friends, you know. Some for sure, yeah, but differently, in different aspect, different level, different color, yeah, right. But with you and Dad, it's like different. You know what I mean?
I think that you have a willingness to go in as far as you can, you know, depending on who you're with, whoever you're communicating with, and I think honestly, that's more attributed to you rather than to me. I think that's more of a quality of yours, which is what I'm saying. You know, in terms of like, you know, you got to have the right dance partner, and you know, you're giving these illustrations of like bantering back and forth, you know, to get to a certain conversational level. But the thing is that even though people can be deep, not everyone is willing, you know?
Right.
Like for instance, like Lindo, he's like very deep about things, you know, he's very deep, very, very profound. Not just about the topics that we talk about.
I like those type of personality though, like those persona, or like this essence of that character, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So like there's people like him,
yeah.
There's other people, you know, who just talk about really deep things in such a matter-of-fact type of way. It's like, whoa, wait, hold on, let me write that down real quick type of people while you're just eating, watching TV or something like that, you know? Those people. But no matter how deep people are, without the willingness to go further, there could be little revelation, and also it's like talent without practice, you know?
So remember, Joe, that I told you that in your Porsche, where we were driving like a few days ago when we went to get like some kind of food or something. I told you that I don't think I'm the best filmmaker or drummer or fighter or any sort of these things. But what I really feel like I've discovered that I'm really truly good at is like in an intimate one-on-one conversation, or like in that particular different realm of friendships or whatever the relationship I have, right, with different people, I'm able to go into some of the territories that they're either not comfortable with, or like they don't, again, show their inner side, but I'm able to like bring that out of people, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just your enthusiasm and longing to learn and understand things. I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Because when you want to learn and understand things of one of God's greatest creations, which is like humans,
Yeah.
you know, and you handle each person differently, and they, at some point in the conversation, they recognize what you're doing, which is you're really trying to get to know them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's why I was like asking you that
Yeah.
question downstairs. Like, has anyone approached you the way like I'm trying to do, like to really get to know you, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm really able, like I'm willing to take off layers of my clothes. I mean, that sounds weird. That sounds weird.
Keep that in.
But you get what I'm saying. I'm willing to take off my outer like shell or
Yeah.
walls. You know what I mean? I'm willing to
Yeah.
bring that down.
And I think that because you are likely more willing than the other person, it a lot of people can't help but disarm themselves. You know, they can't help but like they see someone who's just like basically, let's just say, like undressing themselves. You know what I mean? And it just makes them a little bit more at ease to, you know, put down their gun and shield or something like that, sword and shield.
Yeah.
And I think
I have a huge compassion for people. I really do. And
yeah,
it's one of my gifts that I think God has allowed me to have.
yeah. I mean, it's not common for people to, I'll put it this way. A lot of people are not often seen, but your willingness to see them, I think, makes them feel acknowledged. It makes them feel valued, you know? And I think it makes people feel like a sense of hope, you know? Because at the same time, what you're trying to emphasize is that there is hope, that there is love, that there is God, that there is someone, not just me, or, you know, I'm saying in your voice, not just me, who is wanting to, you know more about you, or wanting to be in your space, and wanting to, you know, who's fighting for you, who is yearning to make light of what some of those issues are, and you know, fix those things. You know what I mean?
Joe, I desperately want to fix the wrong perception that the world has on God. It's one of my deep longing, you know? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I understand.
Like when people think like God is just some hardcore strike you dead because of sin, like in the God of the Old Testament, you know, or God is like some sort of injustice, you know, like what do you call the what do you call that, the political figure, like, you know, the monarchy, like, you know, that king who abuses power, you know. Some people think God like that. They really do.
I think that, well, this is kind of opening up a different conversation, but I did want to at least comment on this though. That mindset of like thinking that God is just like a brutal God, you know, who just walks around with like an axe, just waiting to chop off people's heads.
Yeah, dude, that's pretty extreme, but yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying just like, you know, someone who's just waiting for someone to mess up, type of thing.
Yeah, right.
I believe that a lot of that personification of that type of God really comes from a lot of infliction of what people are going through in those eras. So when there's a lot of like war, when there's a lot of like injustice, when there is a lot of
innocent people dying.
Like you're either on this side or you're either on that side, you know. I think that a lot of that because the reality is that not a lot of people know God or even have a relationship with God. So I think that just a lot of people, when they are like complaining to God and they receive nothing back, you know, they say, well, you know, God did this, you know, God allowed this thing to happen. God is basically probably doing this because, you know, he's punishing us, you know. And so I think a lot of that is just a lot of like self-inflicted reflection, you know. We're throwing something up and it drops and hits us on the head. And I think that we might go through eras in these things. Nowadays, like, apparently God is like a God of acceptance, you know, and everything is okay.
Tolerable, right.
Yeah. And that's a reflection of where we are in society today. You know what I mean? But, you know, there's half-truths in that, right? There's half-truths in saying, you know, God accepts people,
God
but
loves everybody. That is the truth. So that kind of idea
Yeah.
stems from that, you know.
Right.
God truly does love all people, even all the crooked people, to people who even
Yeah.
like committed like unforgivable sins. Even like, I mean, he loves them, you know, so much, you know. But it's unfortunate that the way how humans have interpreted that as the time have progressed, and now we're at a point where, you know, God should, and he's okay with your sexuality, he's okay with whatever the way you want to perceive his word, that's okay, because that's the way how God made you to be. Like these, like, I mean, it's a incredibly, I mean, this is the way how Satan works, you know, and just like, man, like, and then the people who believe these things, like particularly in like progressive Christianity or like these, you know, more of that quote woke Christian society, which actually is a thing, you know, like it's a really like,
it's a lot.
It's a lot, and I'm trying to strategize how I can approach those people.
Yeah, and
you know
a question to kind of run back what you're saying now, that I was thinking of asking earlier, is that beyond ontology, beyond apologetics, what is the next phase of like the next line of defense or even offense that comes from the enemy? You know, because like you were saying,
I have those lists, actually. I have them.
Because like what I see, at least in this current era, is that there is a lot of like for instance, collaborations between like Christians and pop culture. And so there's like this cross mingling to where it's like they're like co-signing for one another, right? And then it kind of puts out like this false narrative. How do I put it? Like,
can I also say something? Just try to keep that memory.
Yeah.
If there are a few things in life that I truly let go of, you know what that is? I stopped listening to worldly music. Because you know, I study music, right? But I realized what music is a sound, right? And then we talked about it in the realm of frequency and so on. So like how, and also certain tonality and qualities of that tone carry certain spirits as well. And this is not some sense of conspiracy voodoo like type of thing that Christian extreme rights are talking about, you know. This is a real thing. It really is true, you know. And so I know even that statement is gonna flip some people off, right? But here, hold on, let me finish. So like one of the things that I realized the danger in my, basically like around the high school, end of high school, that's when I stopped listening to all the worldly music altogether. It's like, I mean, I still listen to it time to time, but not the way I used to, you know what I mean? Like when if it pops out in my thing here and there, I do, you know what I mean? But the way how I used to love world music has dissipated, you know? The idea that Christian rappers, Christian rock, Christian this, Christian that, but then when you really observe the melody, the genre of the music, you're literally only replacing the lyric with some couple of the Bible verses here and there, or like Christian ask the word love or Jesus is like gets thrown in there, you know what I mean? And now it's all of a sudden whoopie-doo Christian music.
Well,
you know?
this is a topic that you had briefly mentioned a long time ago
when I first met you at Elena's house at 2016.
Okay, all right. What month?
I don't know the month, but it was sometime around summer, I believe.
Yeah, this is actually.
And we got heated debate. Remember that? And then
I think that I hear what you're saying, and I mean, I think we can kind of go deeper into this, and this might be a good opening conversation to have. But I would like to have this like a three-way conversation about that, because I think that it's a good topic to talk about, and at the same time, it doesn't cross into. It doesn't make or break salvation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that it's just a good sparring ground.
Yeah.
Per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's stop. Because it's 2 now.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you. I
Good job. You set up all these cameras for I don't even know how long since
altogether.
Yeah, they're still running. You know, they're still going.
These power banks really help, and they're the cheapest and the most affordable way. More cheaper than V-mount options and stuff like that.
I see.
Yeah,
that's a good little sponsor.
Let me get your audio.
Plug.
Get your audio.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.